Now it is time to introduce our main speaker for tonight, John.
My name is John. I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to thank John for asking me to speak. What are you laughing at? I really like a speaker meeting, especially when I'm not the speaker. There's a lot of newcomers here tonight. And I just want to say that, you know, I really relate to the situation that you're in, because if you drank and used drugs like I did, and then found yourself in this room through whatever circumstance, this is a really strange place to be. And for me, I was unbelievably uncomfortable in Alcoholics Anonymous when I first got here. So let me be one of the first people to welcome you. If this is your first meeting, if you're counting days, if you're coming back, welcome. Because if you think like I thought when I got here, you know, it was a very strange thing. And happy birthday to the birthday people, and happy birthday to Connor, who is my Eskimo. And it's funny because at the time he was a pillar of sobriety with the, you know, whatever he had, 70-something days when he took me to my first meeting. You know, and he's a guy who, well, I won't tell his story. But when I got to AA, I was in the basement of churches like this, looking at these things up on the wall with all this God, and there was a lot of chanting and holding hands and standing up and sitting down, and it was like this weird cult with these weird people, and it really, really freaked me out. So if you're uncomfortable in this room tonight, that makes two of us. And I will tell you that at my first meeting, someone said to me, go to 90 meetings in 90 days. So I said, okay, I'm going to do that. They also said, read the first 164 pages of the big book, that blue book. And I tried to do that. But I can tell you if you drank like I did, I was really fuzzy when I got to AA, foggy. And I couldn't understand anything that was going on. And I read those 164 pages, and the sponsor, the guy who found me at my first meeting, was like, I'm going to be your sponsor, read the first 164 pages. He said, so what did you think? And I was like, I don't know. I couldn't remember anything I had read. I was in this haze, like wet brain. And the meetings all sounded like this. It was like, there's up here, and it sounded like that. And I was like standing in the back, and I was like, it was like being at a racetrack. I was like, what's going on? And people are standing up and sitting down and holding hands. Like, I don't like, I mean, I hadn't held anybody's hand in 15 years. And I'm at an AA meeting with a bunch of alcoholics who want to hold hands. And I was like, God, this is really, really, it just wasn't the place for me. And I can tell you that I hadn't heard anything, and I'm going to tell you the first thing I ever heard in an AA meeting. And I was about 53 days sober, and I was at the whatever meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous over there on Melrose at that Hope Church. And I literally was standing 1 foot in and 1 foot out this door, because there's an alleyway there where I used to go out and smoke a cigarette. And this old guy from Texas got up to the mic, and he said, I love the taste of liquor. I love the taste of liquor so much, if I had a dog that pissed bourbon, I'd tie him to the bed and suck his dick. I heard that loud and clear. And my first thought was, where do I get one of those dogs? Because for me, that was a perfect solution, because I love dogs. And dogs love you unconditionally. So if I had that dog, I'd have a friend for life, and I'd always have a drink. But I'll tell you this, you know, that AA meeting taught me something else, which was I took a full step into that room that night. Because, and I can tell you right now, man, at 53 days, that was almost 16 years ago. Like, I don't remember what else the guy said. But I can tell you, he kind of saved my life in a fucked up way. Because I stayed, and it was kind of like that engagement, you know what I mean? Like, we all laugh in this room. It's like they say it's contagious. If you laughed at that joke, you're probably in the right place. You know? And that's how I felt that night. And I would look for speaker meetings then. You know, and there's guys, I've heard lots of guys in this room speak. There's a lot of sobriety in this room, you know, and those guys saved my life. And there's women in this room I've heard speak that have saved my life, you know, and that's just how it works. So just, I'm going to try to tell you my story as best I can. Man. 53 days. So I did it. I did the 90 meetings in 90 days as best I could. Read the first 164 pages. And this sponsor had me, you know, like, I'm trying to, like, hump my way through the steps thinking I'm just going to get through this and it's going to be fine and I'm going to be on with my life, you know? And I don't remember any of this, you know what I mean? I was like 3 months, 4 months, 6 months sober, writing an inventory, like pages and pages and pages in inventory, and I did a 9-step with this guy. I was probably like 7 months sober, and I read it to him on the beach, and we lit it on fire, and it was, you know, and I'm hanging in there. I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm like, you know, a fake it till you make it guy. I'm just trying to do what everybody's trying to tell me to do. And I can remember that I got to the 9th step, and it says, you know, start with your family. So I was like, well, you know, I'm going to call my mom. So I called my mom, who's in New York, and I was like, look, you know, I'm an Alcoholics Anonymous now, and, you know, I could have been a better son, but, you know, there's a couple things that you really did that, Now, this is my mom, who at that time was 30-some years sober, who said to me, like, all right, good, here's the thing, go ahead and don't call me. So that's how that worked, and I was like, wow. It's like, I'm not sure this shit works. So I kind of took a time out on my own. Was like, you know what? So I kept going to meetings, but I didn't really kind of work this. I was kind of like back to standing in that doorway. You know, I really still liked speaker meetings, because the thing about speaker meetings for me was like, I really could connect with certain people. And if you come to meetings long enough, you'll hear your story. You know, you really will. And sometimes I'd hear pieces of it, and sometimes I'd hear things that didn't make any sense to me, but they made me laugh, and that kept me coming back. But, you know, I really liked speaker meetings. And I don't really want to go through my whole background. It's like, you know, I'm Irish, I'm from New York, my father was a New York City cop, a lot of alcoholism in my family. I'll tell you about my first drink and my last drink, and then we'll talk about AA. My first drink came late. I'm the youngest of 4. I knew what alcoholism was. I was never going to drink, you know? But I had that experience that a lot of people talk about around here, where it's like, when I finally had that first drink, boy, it changed my life. I came home from school one day. I was by myself. I was probably 15. And I went into this bathroom in our house that had 2 sinks and a huge mirror, and I poured a huge glass of vodka, like 8 ounces. And I stared in the mirror, and I just downed it in one shot. I was like, I'm going to see what this is all about. What's all the hoopla? And I had that feeling that people describe around here, where it's this warm, blanketing feeling, man. This warm feeling from the inside out. And it was like, it's like, wow. My God, it was the answer. It was absolutely the answer to everything that was wrong with me. So from that moment in my life, from 15 to 25, those 10 years, it was about chasing that feeling. And I was thinking about it today. It's really about comfortable. I wanted to be comfortable, always. I always just wanted to be comfortable, you know? I drank to go drinking. I did, I had to. A lot of times I didn't get there. But, you know, I tried. I did the best I could. So that was my first drink. You know, I went to college. Connor and I actually went to college together, Vassar College. We produced some of the greatest alcoholics known to man. Nothing against the college. It's a beautiful place. It was dirtbags like us that fucked it up. No. There's another friend of ours that is also a sober guy who met me. And it's interesting, too, because there's phrases like, you know, being kind of pregnant or kind of dead. You know, I was kind of a drug dealer, you know? Because when I think about it now, it's like, well, I dealt drugs, and I sold drugs and made money. Does it make me a drug dealer? And I always think of Al S., who speaks around here a lot, who's like, well, you know, if I pick my butt, does it make me a butt picker? And I always think, well, yeah, you know, because I dealt drugs, it kind of made me a drug dealer, even though, like, I look back on it now, I wasn't really a drug dealer. But Adam would tell a different story, in that, like, the first time he ever met me, I was the drug dealer. I was the guy they called the captain. I wore this stupid, like, Captain and Tennille captain's hat. I wish I was lying. And I was the guy with the cocaine, and they're like, man, that guy's really weird, man. He's really, you know. And it's funny because I guess I was a drug dealer. You know, I really want to, even now I want to defend it and say I wasn't really a drug dealer, but I think anybody who's ever done a lot of cocaine is really a drug dealer at the end of the day, right? A little bit. Didn't you sell some? Sometimes? A little bit? Fuck. So anyway, living in LA, I'm 24. This will be the last drink, and then we'll get on to my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous. So it's funny how we talk about we seek lower companions when we drink, and we make bad decisions when we drink and do drugs. So I was, what did I say? Call me 24 years old, and we were going to Vegas, and I was living with my girlfriend at the time, and there was like 8 or 9 of us who were going to Vegas, and we decided that we should, you know, I was into smoking pot at this point, and I had a lot of good hydroponic weed, and I always had a flask with me, which was funny because every birthday from the time I was 19, I would get at least 3, 4, 8, 12 flasks, you know? I got you the perfect gift. Everybody always give me a flask. I know, it's like it should be on the 20 questions. It's like, do you have more than 8 flasks? It's like, yeah, I do. Actually, I do. Got 8 flasks. I had all kind, hand-blown ones, tin ones with my name carved in it, and like all kinds of shit, you know what I mean? If people give you flasks, you're fucking drunk, trust me. So, they just did, you know? I mean, like, and if it wasn't that, it was a bottle of booze to put in it. And so we were in Vegas, and like, we decided before we went that we should get some ecstasy. And this is like 1990, I don't know, man, 2, 3, like raves hadn't really started. So ecstasy was the actual thing, the MDA or MDMA was the actual prescription, like, you know, not the shit that some, you know, toothless dude in the desert is making and you're getting at some party, you know, it's some horse tranquilizer, whatever. I mean, not that I didn't take that shit too, but, you know, this was the other stuff. But it was me and Adam was like, yeah, no, we should do this. Let's make the connection. And the connection was like out there on La Brea, you know, at the Carl's Jr. Now, when you think about that, it's like, you know, the bad decisions you make when you're an alcoholic. It's like, okay, we're going to the Carl's Jr. on La Brea to meet the connection, who's like this girl who's about 14 pounds with bug eyes. It's like, what about that sounds like a bad decision? You know, she hands us the drugs and like a bag of curly fries for a decoy, you know. What's a bad decision about this? Is sounding right? This is checking all the boxes. So we get to Vegas, and you know, it's really, the real point of the whole trip to Vegas is that, you know, what it points out to me about my alcoholism is that it was about enough. There was never enough, you know? If I could get comfortable, I could get more comfortable, couldn't I? It's like that whole thing about what drink gets you drunk. Is it the 1st, the 8th, the 15th? One's too many, 1,000's not enough? That's the problem. That was my problem, the idea of enough. So we go to Vegas, and you know, the thing about me and drinking and taking drugs was that I wanted to get that chemistry right. I wanted to get that perfect fucking high, the right combination, you know? So we're in Vegas, and I had tequila in the flask. Who puts tequila in a flask? Like another really bad decision. So I'm drinking tequila out of the flask. We're smoking the hydroponic weed. It's getting really right. We've got this curly fries bag full of ecstasy. And we put it out on the table, and there's, like I said, there was like 8 or 10 of us, and we all took a hit of ecstasy. And I gotta tell you, it was right. It was right as rain. It's like, it was the one night everything was absolutely perfect. You know, it's like I had the right amount of every chemical. It was perfect. I was blazing in such the perfect way. Now the problem was, I looked down at the table and there was 2 hits of ecstasy left. And I look across the room and Adam, God bless him, was looking right at me. And we, you know, Wonder Twins, like, yeah, if this is great, it can be greater. So we took the extra hit of ecstasy each. And from there, everything went unbelievably bad. Unbelievably so. I don't know that I've ever blacked out on a drug like that before, honestly, but I did, and it was awful. I mean, really awful. And we were in Vegas at the Excalibur Hotel, and what's wrong with that decision? These are all good decisions. It's about making good decisions when you're really fucked up on drugs. And I came to, it was the next day somehow, and I was drinking really cheap scotch that was being handed to me by a girl in like some medieval wench costume, you know, and It's like everybody is in this medieval garb. There's knights, and like it was the Super Bowl, which I had conveniently forgotten, and it was like the Cowboys were playing the Buffalo Bills, and like people were dressed like Indians and running all over the place, and I'm not having a good trip now at all. And I mean, I was really freaking out, honestly, like one of those bad, oh my God, my heart, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die. And the guy I was with, who's another member of AA who was also on the trip, well, I was like an AA All-Star weekend in the making, the minor leagues, if you will. And he was totally fucked. And I said to him, are you still, we were downing this scotch, just downing. I said, are you getting drunk? He's like, no, me neither. And I was like, oh, we're still on that shit, man, we're gonna die. And how that ended was the idea that, I was in a fetal position in the bathroom of the Excalibur Hotel. And like it says in the big book, I was looking to God like, this Bush League pinch hitter. I was like, please, God, help me. Help me. It's like, if I get through this, I will never do this again, ever, ever, ever. And, I'd like to tell you I got sober the next day. I didn't, but it wasn't long after that it really fell apart completely for me. And, I had DTs from quitting drinking. I was in New York. I decided to go to New York to a friend's wedding. I didn't bring any drugs with me or anything. I was like, I'm just going to clean up. And I had these awful bug dreams and sweats and the whole it was really scary. I'd seen enough TV movies to be like, you're kidding me. Really? And it was real, and it was really fucking scary. And Connor, that's the thing about having people that like in this room. There's a lot of people I love that are in this room that know me, and I can't talk bullshit, because he knows I called him crying from New York at like 4 in the morning. I'm like, you gotta take me to one of those meetings. I gotta go to those meetings. And he did. He did. And he took me to that first meeting. I had to stand up and say, I'm John, I'm an alcoholic. Man. So, AA has been this unbelievable experience, man. It gave me a life that I don't deserve, honestly. And it's good to have people in this room that know that, because I can't and won't ever forget that. So, going back in time, let's say I called my mom and she told me don't call her. Let's say I'm 9 months sober. And I'm loafing around AA, and some of you may be in this place where it's like, okay, I get it. I go to the meetings, I'm trying to do the steps. I'm right here. I kept going to meetings, and then one night I heard a guy speak, and he told my story. It was at Chinatown, when Chinatown was actually in Chinatown. And I was like, wow, that's the guy, man. That is the fucking guy. And it took me a while to track the guy down because I was reluctant to, and then I finally called the guy, and I was actually in a bar when I called him. Because when you get sober and you're 25, like, where are you supposed to hang out? It's like everyone still goes to bars. So I'm in a bar, and I call a guy, and he said, why are you calling me? I said, well, I heard you speak, man, and I really like what you had to say. And, and he said, well, listen, if you're calling me to hang out, that's fine. But if you're calling me for me to be your sponsor in AA, that's a different thing. And if you are, then I'm going to give you direction. I'm going to expect you to take it. And I was like, all right, kind of. And he's like, no, I'm serious. He said, you got to tell me right now. If you're going to do what I tell you, then you can, And I was like, what a dick. I was like, all right, yeah, okay, yeah, that's what it is. And he said, all right, he said, read the first chapter in the 12 and 12. Read step 1 in the 12 and 12. Underline anything that pertains to like your experience and, call me. Let's have a conversation about it. So I read it. The other thing I want to throw in there, too, is that I have guys in here that I've worked the steps with, and we talk about the principles a lot, So I'm going to try, because I always try to talk about the principles of AA because they're really important in my life. And I've been taught the principles. And it helps me a lot. The principle of the first step is honesty. And that ain't always easy. But we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives become unmanageable. It's good, that first step, because I can really substitute anything for alcohol now. Food, lust, sex, greed, money, fear. I'm powerless over lots of things sometimes. So I called this guy, and we talked about it, and I was feeling all right. And he said, okay, read the second step. So I read the second step. And the principle of the second step is hope, We come to believe that a power greater than ourselves will restore us to sanity, which pre-assumes that we are insane, which is funny because we are. Okay, I get it. There's hope. Now, the third step is interesting. The principle of the third step is faith. And I read it with this guy, and we talked about it. And there's a third step prayer that I say every day. Relieve me of the bondage of self. So we get to the fourth step, right? Principle of the fourth step is courage, as I was taught. You know, the searching and fearless moral inventory. So the guy says to me, I'm going to tell you really clearly how you're going to do this. I said, okay. He said, you're going to write 3 inventories. He said, there's 3 inventories inside this inventory process, right? Resentment, fear, and the sexual inventory. And you're going to write them all in the same way. I said, okay. So you're going to write those columns down. You're going to start in the first column, start with your family, and you write your father, your mother, your sister, your brother, your other sister. It's like, and you write down. Then you get to the next column, the cause, and you write that down. And I was like, okay. And what I realized was I had done it differently the other time, where I'd written a cross, and I'd written, like, my father. And then, like, I started thinking about my dad, and I was like, the cause, and I was like, oh. And then I went and had a cigarette for, like, 4 months. And, you know, that was my problem, was, like, thinking about it that way. You know, the book says a company that never takes inventory is sure to go broke. So he said to me, look, man, the inventory is just like that business. Just go and tell me what's there. It's like you look in that cupboard and just write down what's in there. I don't want to know, like, if it's a can of tomatoes, if it's a box of wheat thins. It's like, I don't care how you feel about the wheat thins. Just write down that's what it is until you're done writing down what's in there. And then you go to the next, and you write that column top to bottom. And I just share that with you because it changed my experience with the inventory. You know, it made it less like me trying to make some comment about it other than just like to put it down on paper. Because ultimately, you know, the benefit of it was ultimately sharing it in the 5th step with somebody else, you know? So I did that, and before I started to write this inventory, this guy said to me, listen, he's like, don't leave anything off this inventory. He said, look, you can write 150,000 pages, I don't care. He's like, you know, but if you leave off like the 6 or 7 or 9 most shameful, painful things in your life, you're wasting my time. And again, I was like, what a dick this guy is. But I did it. You know, I did it. So funny, the sexual inventory. I was like, what am I supposed to do? And he's like, write it down. He's like, I'm sure there's some shameful shit on that inventory. He's like, I don't care about Mary Jane Rottencrotch from the 6th grade that you don't give a fuck about, but you can write it down if you want. He's like, but if you leave that shameful stuff off that inventory, you're going to suffer. It's like, all right, man. Dick. See, because the thing is, I saw this guy speak at a meeting, and I thought, we're going to be best friends. This guy and I were going to be best friends. And I can tell you that never happened. But he saved my life. So I wrote this inventory, and I have to tell you, it was much shorter than the one that I set on fire on the beach. Much shorter. It really was. It was like 4 or 5 pages total, all of it. And so then I had to go up there and read it to him, you know? Step 5. Admit it to God, to ourselves and another human being. The principle of step 5 is integrity. So I'm driving up to see this guy, and my stomach is in knots. I was sure I had like food poisoning, you know. I really did not want to go do this with this guy. But I went, and I have to tell you that I had this amazing experience at this guy's house. It's like I started to read this inventory to him, and he did, like it says in the book, you know, I mean, he shared experiences back to me that were really similar. And I've now had, you know, the amazing experience of being on the other side too, and hearing people read inventories to me and having the opportunity to share back with them experiences I've had. And it takes that shame, like, and just, it just lifts it. It's like all of that, like, that stuff you carried around forever just seems to go, you know? Like Cubby used to say, he's like, he'd heard however 10,000 inventory was all the same shit, didn't matter. Boys, girls, same thing. It was all the same stuff. And it's like that common connection, the same way we laugh and hear at people's stories, you know? It's like that's the stuff that bonds us. You know, that was the experience I had with the guy that night, you know? I was thinking about how funny it is that we laugh at shit in here. I was at a meeting one day, and this woman was crying, you know. She was sharing. She was brand new, you know what I mean? And she was like, I just wanna. And we're all leaning off our chairs. We're like, come on, honey, what is it? And she's like, I just want to smoke crack like normal people. I was like, God bless you, honey. Me too. You know? But we know that's funny. You know what I mean? And she meant it dead to rights. I want to smoke crack like normal people. Yeah, okay. Step 6. Principle is willingness. You know, step 6 is the one that's, doesn't it say it's the one that separates the men from the boys? You know, because there's certain character defects I don't want removed. Or sometimes I kind of want it removed but don't. So I'll ask on one day and then kind of take it back, you know. Step 7, admit it to God. Principle is humility. That's step 7 in the 12 and 12 is some of the most inspired writing I've ever read, I think. You know, honestly. Like if I read nothing else, step 7 in that 12 and 12. It's got some of the best stuff in there. It talks about self-centered fear. It talks about how we never thought about making honesty, tolerance, and true love of man and God a daily basis for living. Honesty, tolerance, and true love of man and God a daily basis for living. Man, if I'm in that place, I can't miss, man. So step 8, I'm supposed to make this list with this guy, right? So he was like, set it on fire. Why would you set it on fire? Asshole. I was like, look, man, I'm just doing what you tell me. So I make this list, you know, and this guy was so hardcore. Step 8, the principle is brotherly love, because it's the first time we're actually thinking about other people. Everything else is about us and God and our relations. It's the first time we start thinking about our fellows and some of the shit that we did, right? So I make this list of people that I'd harmed, you know, and I said to him, well, look, you know, I had a lot of financial amends, and I was a bartender. And believe it or not, as a bartender, I took money. No, really, I did. And maybe I dealt drugs. No, really, maybe I did. So I'll tell this example of how this guy was determined with this program. So we get to this one. I worked at this hotel as a bartender for a few years, a job I was asked to leave. And I'd stolen money. I'd stolen my bank, basically. And he said, well, how much money is that? I said, it's $300. And he said, $300? He said, all right, well, you're going to have to go pay them back. I said, yeah, but see. He said, well, how much money do you have? I said, about $80. And he said, all right, well, you're going to take $20 and you're going to go down to the hotel and you're going to tell them, look, you know, you stole the money, you want to make an amends, and you want to put the amends in process, and you're going to give them $20. And I just kind of looked at him, and he was like, what? And I was like, are you fucking crazy? He's like, what do you mean? I said, if I go to the hotel that I haven't worked at and got fired from like 3 or 4 years ago and show up and be like, hey, remember me? I stole all this money and I don't have it, so here's $20. He's like, yeah, that's pretty much right. I was like, on what planet does that make any sense? And he was like, you're going to do that. I was like, yeah, okay. So then I decided not to talk about that with him ever. And occasionally he'd bring it up. He'd say, what's going on with the hotel? Did you go to the hotel? Did you go to the hotel? Did you go to the hotel? And he would not shut up at the fucking hotel. And then one day I called him about, oh, my girlfriend and blah, blah, blah. He said, you know what, man? I don't want to hear shit about your girlfriend anymore. He said, until you go to the hotel, don't call me. Some of these guys like my mom. It's like, click, don't call me. So I got really pissed, and I was having this dark moment as we have in AA sometimes, you know? That's a good thing about alcoholism, man. It comes and goes. So if you've got it bad, like, it will go. It will pass. So I finally was like, I'm going to punish this dude. I was like, I'm going to the hotel. And I was like, I can't wait to see how fucking crazy this is going to get. So I go to this hotel, and I find the guy who I worked for. He's still working there. He's been a manager there for like 25 years. And he's a guy from Thailand who's about this tall. And his name is Vince. And Vince was a lovely dude, man. He really was. He looked out for me when I worked there and everything else. And he was happy to see me for the most part. And Vince was a guy that when I worked for him, he had an extra thumb on his right hand. And he used to say shit to me like, I'll give you 11 good reasons you should do this. I swear to God. I would imitate the guy, but that's not nice. But I mean, it was crazy. It was hilarious. I mean, he's this big. I give you 11 good reasons. So I go to him and I said, look, you know, when I was working here, I took money and I want to repay it and I don't have it. And, you know, and he said to me, well, you got to take that up with human resources. And I said, okay. He said, I'll set up an appointment for you to go talk to them about it and everything. And I said, all right. And he kind of looked at me and he said, yeah, I get it, man, I get it. And he said, you know, you're trying to create this good feeling. I said, yeah. And then he sat there and an amazing thing happened. He interpreted the 9th step perfectly because it says, you know, except when to do so would injure them or others. Because he looked at me and he said, wait, you know what? If you go talk to them and tell them that you stole money from this hotel when you worked for me, he's like, that makes me look bad. He said, that makes me look like I didn't do my job. And I was like, good point. And he said to me, I'll tell you what. He's like, why don't you make a donation to something, to a charity, to something good, not a church, something good. And we used to do this charity when we worked there. We were always working parties for these different things, and one of them was AIDS Project LA. And we both kind of thought about it. It was like, because it was this big event that had been there, and I was like, well, what about APLA? So that's good, that's good. So it's like I reached out to them, and I said, look, you know, I'm going to make a donation in the name of this hotel. And they were like, great. They were, of course, they were happy to get the money, you know. So it's like, the point was, you know, he looked at me and he said, you know, I'm very proud of you. You know? And nobody ever said that to me in my life. Me and Ty Vince, you know? Like this amazing moment. It's like I sat there and started crying in the guy's office. And I left the hotel and I had to call the dickhead sponsor in New York. And I'm crying in my car. I was like, you don't understand, man. I just had this experience with this guy. And he's like, yeah, I do. I understand that. He said, do you see how your lack of willingness kept you from this experience with God? And I thought, yeah, he's right. And that's willingness, you know, that principle, the sixth step. So it changed my experience with that ninth step. Because he had said to me, what are you going to do? You're going to wait to get $1 million and then pay all these people back? And I was like, that's an awesome plan. And he was like, no, you put the amends in motion and you leave it up to God to come up with the money. And as soon as I did that, I mean, I had to reach out to an ex-girlfriend whose car I'd wrecked, and she had to pay for it, and like, I had to make these really humbling phone calls, you know, to say, look, I want to make this right. It's like I did this, and I want to do what I can to make it right. And as soon as I did that, took that humble posture, my whole experience changed, man. It's like, and God came up with the money like that. It was odd the way that happened, you know. 10 is the inventory, you know. Perseverance is the principle there. 11, spirituality, and 12 is service. You know. The principles of AA have saved my life, you know. And the story I didn't tell was about my girlfriend I only have 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and the part I left out about the Vegas trip was this girl that I was dating at the time, you know, and how we were when we were blazing in the good part, you know. She was wearing this Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles t-shirt that had a raised waffle printed on it, and she was sitting there saying, feel my waffle. And I decided that we should be called Joe and Jackie Waffle Chunder. It was all like, it made sense when we were on drugs, trust me. And the funny thing is that she would be here tonight, but she had to stay home with our 3 kids, you know. I married that girl. And it's amazing. I mean, it's like, you know, I know we all have alcoholics in our life. And I heard someone once say, you know, there's no more going into the darkness to save them. You stand in the light until they see you. You know? This is a really tough disease. You know, we're really lucky to be in this room, obviously. You know? And if this thing has taught me anything, it's that, you know, the meaning of life is love. That's it. It doesn't cost anything. Love what you do. Love who you're with. I promise you, from my experience anyway, nothing else means anything. You know, the last thing I'll tell you is, oh man, we have 3 kids. Like I said, we have 2 boys and a little girl. And I had to pick my sons up at a birthday party a few months ago. And they'd been given this CD, and you know how annoying kids' music is. And they give them giving away this thing, you know, and so like they're like, Dad, put it on, put it on, put it on. So it's like I put it on in the car. And there was all this bad music or whatever, but then they played Queen's We Will Rock You. You know, and the kids were like, this is awesome, I've heard this song before, I love it, I love it, I love it. And they saw me kind of singing or whatever, and they're like, Dad, you know this song? I was like, yeah. And they're like, who's it by? And I was like, a band called Queen. And they're like, really? They're like, do they have any other songs? And all I'll leave you with is this amazing moment I got to have when I got home and went on iTunes and bought Bohemian Rhapsody and played it for my then like 7 and 5-year-old sons who like it's like stood there with their eyes wide open, like, what is that? It was like this amazing thing, and they turned this lightsaber into a Stratocaster. As soon as that bridge hit, I was like, look at that. That's just instinct. You can't teach that. It was like this amazing thing. So that's it. I'll just tell you this, man. If you wanna find God, you're welcome to come to my house any day, and hear my sons play Let It Be on the piano. I thank you for my sobriety. Thanks, John.